our responsibility really is to educate leaders on how do you have the right kinds of conversations with your employees to better understand how they can fit in the organization. Because unless there's a behavioral problem, there is a seat for them on the bus, right? If we look at the Good to Great book, but there are seats for everyone if we're open-minded and we're having good conversations and we truly know what it is our employees are good at, what they want to do, how they're motivated, where do their skills fit. Oftentimes, what I see is that if an employee comes into the organization and they already have a degree, they never even consider that they can continue to get more education, and that you don't have to get another bachelor's degree or you don't have to get a master's degree. You can just take a course on Gen AI if you want, right? You can just take a course on how to be a better leader from a community college in the town you live in or from a university that you are associated with, right? But oftentimes we don't have this mindset that we can use these programs that companies have in place to just go and get one class, just to upskill us in one area that we need to. And leaders are not necessarily having the best conversations with the employees to encourage that.
All right, everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the HR Heroes podcast. I'm incredibly excited because I have an amazing guest with me here today. April, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Keenan. Glad to be here.
Today's going to be an awesome conversation. One of the things that I thought was really important is to highlight the fact that you are an avid golfer. And so as we kind of get started here today, I want to highlight one question for you, and it's going to really kind of put you in one camp or the other. Are you a PGA person or are you a live golf person? What's your 2 cents?
Oh my goodness. I believe there should be a choice. And so I guess I don't sit in either camp, and I know that's not the answer that you want. I think probably I'm still leaning towards PGA, to be honest.
Okay.
I feel like I'm still going PGA here. But I do like the idea that people have their own choice, and it is what it is. But I miss seeing some of the other players, and yeah, it's a little different. So hopefully we get it all figured out.
So my question is, and maybe I misunderstood this, but didn't Liv come back and purchase the PGA? So aren't they one organization now, but they still run separate tours, or how does that work now?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't follow it as much. So Avid is, yes, I love to play the game, but I don't follow it as much. My husband could probably answer that question for you because he watches the Golf Channel every single day. I tend to stay away from the television, so I couldn't answer that question. Maybe they have.
Totally fair. Well, I think, the landscape of golf is changing, just like the landscape of HR is changing and how we kind of position work. And it gives us an opportunity to kind of dive into the episode today. I like to ask a human-centric question to kind of get past the pleasantries. So Sure. How's your heart doing today?
Great question. Well, I could look at my Garmin and it might tell me. No, my heart is doing good, actually. I am spending this week actually working from my daughter's house. And so my bucket is full, you could say, because I'm getting some time with my daughter in Wyoming and we don't get a whole lot of time together. So yeah, I'm good.
I love that. There's something special to be talking about kind of how we can refill our cup by spending time with family. This has been something that's been on the front of my mind. As the time of recording this, me and my girlfriend are working through the possibility of moving back to Hawaii. She got a job offer there as a physician's assistant. We're currently based in Las Vegas, where all of our family's at. But as we're getting older, we're finding that our family is choosing to go live in different places like Arizona or Florida, sisters in San Diego. And we're kind of thinking about like what is most important for us at this point in time in our life. And we're trying to figure out if we're going to move to Hawaii for a couple of years and be able to spend time there. But being able to be around family is something that definitely fills my cup, if you will. And The older I get, the more I realize how important that stuff is, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's very important. Our adult children have all moved away from where we raised them. And so I understand that completely. They are really doing great in their lives. But not where we live. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, I miss them. And I'm fortunate that I get to go and spend a little time with them. A lot of people maybe don't get that opportunity to spend time traveling or going and seeing their family as often as my husband and I get to. So I'm very fortunate. I'm very blessed, and I think all the powers that be for the opportunities I'm given to do that. So yeah, that's my cup is very full this week. So
I love that.
it's very good. And I just saw my other son. I have a son in Austin, Texas, and I saw him not too long ago. And so yes, it's been a good month and a half or so of lots of time with my adult children.
You know, one of the things that we like to do on the podcast is tie our previous episode together with this episode by having our previous guest ask you a question. Now, this individual,
Okay.
his name was Eddie Curran. He works for a large school district down in the Austin, Texas area. And his
Okay.
question for you was, how are you preparing your organization for the generation of workers who aren't yet in your organization, meaning future proofing for this new generation of people who are coming into the space?
That is a very good question. This topic actually just came up not too long ago with a group of HR colleagues where we were talking about the generation that's still in, middle school and high school, and what are we doing to partner with those schools. And I would say in my organization, we do have some really nice programs that we run with middle schools, high schools, even some of the elementary schools. So some mentoring type of programs where we will go into even our elementary schools. For example, we have an R&D team that will go and do robotics competitions with elementary aged students. And we do a manufacturing day. Well, there's a national organization that runs this manufacturing day every year, and our company in the US participates in that across the country. So we will have a number of our factories that will open up their doors to bring in students of all ages, just to give them that opportunity to see what it's like inside of a manufacturing environment, because a lot of times people just have a negative connotation to what manufacturing might look like. So giving them that opportunity to see inside the doors and see that it's clean, and that it's that people are happy, and it's a good opportunity for a career path. And I think we're seeing also this shift potentially that will come, where more of our young adults at this point, I would say late teens, are just making decisions to not go directly to college, or don't want to have the debt of going to college. And so they're making different choices. And I think we have to do a better job of preparing our leadership also in how do we recruit, um, where we had positions in the past that were generally degreed positions. How do we navigate the waters? Where does it really require a degree? Are there people out there that are learning how to be self-taught? I have an example of this with my own son, who is in robotics, and he is all self-taught. So I think we have to become aware of the opportunities that this generation is a YouTube generation. I don't know if that's really a term that they would like to be called, but they can learn pretty much anything on the internet. And you can learn a lot of things on the internet without going into debt, like some students are going into debt to get a degree. So yeah, I think we have to continue to teach our leaders how to look differently at their positions. Does it really require that education, or can we develop programs internally where we can teach them internally, as opposed to always expecting that they have to come in the door with the experiences?
In our last conversation, we talked a little bit about somebody who's, semi-famous, is how I'll put it, on Instagram and the social sphere, Gary Vaynerchuk. So Gary
Yes.
Vaynerchuk released a book in 2021, I believe it was. It was called 12 and a half, the ingredients, or leveraging the emotional ingredients necessary for business success, and the change of leadership that is necessary to push organizations forward and be successful. One of the 12 and a half ingredients in this, I would say, ingredient list of success was curiosity. And when you were talking there, I was thinking about leaders today have to be curious about how we're going to be able to meet this new YouTube generation of people who are coming into the space, because they have abilities to learn things, gain skills, go into areas where they get life experience that is so much more valuable than just having the degree and then getting the experience that comes out of that standard process. And so what do you think about the element of curiosity, especially in leadership today, because we talk about it from employee perspective and being curious and learning new things. But what about leadership and curiosity and how that works?
Yes, that's a really great question. And after you mentioned the book, I ordered the book. So I had
Nice.
followed Gary Vee, but I had not bought his book. So I have his book actually in my bag. I have not started reading it yet because I'm not finished with my previous one. But so I'm anxious to jump in. Curiosity from a leadership perspective, I believe, is incredibly important. At the company that I work for, we are fortunate enough to have curiosity as one of our 4 values. And so, from the CEO through to every production employee, it is a core value that we need to demonstrate, and that includes leadership. The reason why I think leaders need to focus on it more going forward than maybe they have in the past is because of the future of work looking different. And if our leaders aren't curious enough to engage in what that could look like and to educate themselves independently, we can't create every training program for them. We need them to have that curiosity themselves to dig into topics that are going to help us with the future of work. And in particular, in this space of Gen AI and where some of these things are going to take the business, we really need to have leaders engaging in more curious learning in order to stay up with the times and to be competitive in the markets that we need to be competitive in, whether that be in the industries or in the labor market. We have to stay on top of the things that are going to set us apart.
What are you doing when it comes to the use of AI? So being in an HR position, being an HR leader, I think is really interesting because, a lot of topics on the podcast recently have been around how technology fits into the space of AI or how AI fits into the space of HR. But a lot of the conversations are directed towards recruitment, as an example. But I realize
Yes.
that is kind of like a scary space because when we're talking about recruitment, we're talking about selection. And selection, when you're talking about an algorithm that's doing it, often comes with bias. And so, are you thinking about recruitment? Are you thinking about HR functions, relieving redundant tasks? How are you thinking about AI in the position of HR?
Yeah, great question. I believe that the selection process for me, I don't really focus a lot of AI on the selection process. I'm sure that we will get to that at some point, but I don't believe the technology is there yet for us to be focusing there. I do believe that there are ways that AI can help us with interview processes. So, I mean, we've been doing video interviews for years. There are tools that we are starting to look at that can do the actual questions. It can have a person asking the questions as opposed to just having a script and the person reading the script and it only be a one-way record, so it appears there's a dialogue. We are testing some of those kinds of things to see how we want to navigate that, and I think there's no harm in doing that. I do think that if you can create that initial interview, that kind of screening interview, if you will, if you can integrate some form of conversation as opposed to just this one way recording, I do think that the mind just will respond better to that. So I think that can be very helpful for the candidate experience. The selection process, I'm not really there yet myself. So I tend to think we still need to we need to let people continue to develop that area. Other places that I'm using AI and that our company is using AI from an HR perspective, I definitely use it for things like analyzing data that we don't necessarily have good trend information or trend data from. So, for example, employee survey data where we get a lot of comments for multiple years in a row. It's nice to be able to take these comments and be able to use Gen AI to say, tell me what the trends are showing, because I can look at the data from one year to the next, but not necessarily am I seeing yet the trend information coming from the supplier that we're using for our engagement surveys. Now, I'm sure they're working on that, so they're going to probably have something for us where I won't have to do it myself here pretty soon. but right now that's something that I do use the information for. I also will dump, exit interview data, and I will pull some of the trendy data out of things like Power BI, where I'm looking at countries, where we might see turnover in certain countries, especially when it comes to wanting to really understand how, is it our 1 year and less employees that are leaving, and in what particular countries are we seeing that more often. So it's really around that data analysis. I'm using it to help me just analyze it, so I don't have to sit there and try to put together ugly looking pivot tables in an Excel file anymore. I could just ask it to tell me what I need to know, which is really nice. The other thing, for redundant tasks, I think it can also be very helpful. I'm not seeing immediate needs for that, but I do believe that we will start to see more shifts from a redundancy perspective from our services, HR services type of positions. Our company currently is in a transformation where we're moving to a new HR system. So I won't mention any company brands right now, but we're moving to a new system. And I believe, once we get through that transformation, we'll definitely be using the system and Gen AI to help reduce some of the redundancy of tasks, and both from an HR perspective and a manager perspective as well. So,
I mean, it's an interesting time because the technology in itself continues to propel us forward. And it's an interesting conversation to kind of think about the bell curve of adoption, if you will. Often when we think about the people who are most forward leaning on AI and technology, it's normally your startups, your founders, the people who are visionaries. And the other side of the bell curve is normally our HR leader as an avatar, not always abreast to technology, not always abreast to the innovative stuff. But we have to look at technology as an accelerator, not a replacement. If we want to be effective, to put the human back in the human seat, elimination of those redundant tasks, answering questions about PTO, benefits, that type of stuff can easily be handed off to AI in easy ways that people can understand and communicate. So that's super cool.
yes.
Because we're talking about technology here, I want to kind of pivot into your history and kind of how you found your role into HR. So I know that we had an interest at one point in time in being a fifth grade math teacher, and you said, hold on, I don't think I really want to do this. You had a switch to psychology, and then you ended up getting your degree in computer science and your master's in information management systems. So let's kind of talk about this journey, if you will, and kind of what brought you to the space of HR. How'd you get here?
Yes. I I did want to be a math teacher, and I have so much respect for every teacher on earth, because it was not for me. I realized in one of the classes that required me to go in and do a little shadowing that this was definitely not going to be the place I could see myself living. And so changed my major, moved over to criminal psychology actually, and thought, oh, this will be exciting. Why not try criminal psychology? I enjoyed the psychology side of things. I didn't so much appreciate the criminal psychology side of things. I felt like that was not going to be a space that I was going to feel comfortable either. And so actually kind of ended up at a bit of a loss, not knowing necessarily where I was going. I'm a first generation college student, so I didn't have support from my parents to be able to guide me through this process. I was doing it pretty much on my own, and I went and met with one of the academic advisors and was trying to figure out what other options there were. And this particular person said, oh, women in computer science are going to make a lot of money. So maybe you should go there. Maybe you should try computer science. You can make a lot of money that way. And coming from a place that I came from, which is not one of wealth, that's for sure. It was living where government assistance was something that we received. I was very much interested in making money. I did not want to live the same lifestyle, and so this was appealing. So I changed my major and I went to computer science. I received my bachelor's and my master's, thinking that, why not? You might as well. And then I ended up working my first real corporate job was with an aerospace company, and I went to work in the HR department. So I applied for a position because I wanted to get my foot in the door. This was a big company in the area that I lived in, and very reputable. People, talked a lot about how it was a great company to work for. So I just really wanted to get my foot in the door, and they had this entry level HR role. And so I applied, and I thought, well, we'll see. With the hopes that I would go use my computer science degree, of course. I thought I would get my foot in the door and then I would move over into that organization, and I never did. So I took the HR position, and I worked for a great leader who really just inspired me to use, I guess, kind of a God given gift. I'm not sure, but just my ability to get to know people, help people feel comfortable talking to me, being, I guess, trustworthy and respected for being able to solve problems in a very calm manner. And I don't know, I just really fell in love with this idea of being able to help people in the workplace. And I kind of later in life realized, probably just in the last maybe 5 years or so, I've kind of reflected a lot on that. And I've really realized that I went to work, without getting too personal, I went to work very early in my life. I started working as early as I could possibly get a job because I really wanted to make my own money. And I was very interested in being able to buy my own clothes and things like that. So I've been very, very independent for a very long time. And there was not a lot of emotional, physical, or psychological safety in my home. And so I also realized that when I was going to work, I was going to a place that made me feel safer, and that people were very kind and very caring about. They were looking out for me also. People would ask how I was. And this was very different for me. And I think, having reflected back, I think that's always been something that's been in my mind, is that I need to create workplaces where people have a safe space to go, because we never know what their home life might be like. We never know what's going on outside of work. So let's do everything we can, because we spend so much time at work, to make this a space that allows for that psychological safety and that emotional safety, if you will, because they just might not be getting it somewhere else. So it's really been this huge, this passion of mine. I've stayed in HR the majority of my 27 years. I did take a little break and went into manufacturing. I spent about 3 years outside of HR, but with the same company, the same aerospace company, where I was in manufacturing management. I had a great time leading a team. I made a lot of mistakes in my very first leadership position, leading people. I made some mistakes. I learned some valuable lessons about what it really means to lead people in that way. And then I went back into human resources, and I'm still here in human resources. Different company, but still in the field, still continuing my life's mission, which is really to create positive employee experiences by enhancing leadership performance.
One of my favorite guests on the podcast as of recent was a guy named Chris Gillett. He was a HR leader for DHL on a global scale, very similar to you. And he talked about, before there was HR and before there was the acronyms like DE and I, we need to remember that there were human beings who cared. Yes. And hearing your story and the origin story and how you wanted to create a safe place for others is the essence of what an HR hero truly is. Being somebody who wants to care for others and create a safe space in work, I feel like is so much more important today than it's ever been. Why? Because the blend of work, if you will, and life has gotten so blurry, the line between them, if you will. Our personal lives bleed into work. Work-life balance really isn't a thing anymore. It's more of a work-life integration. And I feel like it's so important to be able to give praise to the leaders like you who continuously embody what it means to have a safe environment for us to show up in work, which is a huge part of our lives. And I just want to say, thank you so much for all that you do. It's so amazing.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I enjoy it. I don't feel like I have a job. I have a passion and I love it. It doesn't feel like work. It's just something I do. So I just get paid to do it too, which is great.
which is amazing, right?
I
And that's kind of
know.
what we talked about
Yeah.
last time. I was like, me being an entrepreneur, I love what I do, and I would hate to be deprived of something that I'm truly passionate about because it's in a position of work in my life. And I feel like now is a really good opportunity because earlier in the episode, we talked a little bit about kind of, the path that your son has taken in the
Mhm.
robotic space
Mhm.
without a degree. And I feel like that in itself is just so
Yes.
on brand for this next generation of people who are coming through the education system and creating professional lifestyles for themselves. I want to talk about the leadership, if you will, in a younger generation sense. So we recognize that the younger generation needs so much more than what we needed and our previous generations needed in the workspace. Talk about empathy, talk about the emotional connection, work life integration for millennials and Gen Z. What's your 2 cents on why this generation needs more from work compared to where our previous generations came from?
Wow. So the question is very intriguing, and I will say my answer might not be common. I'm not sure how much of what they need is different. And what I mean by that is I still feel like, just like you were mentioning before, it's a human element. I don't believe that the generation coming in, so if I use my children as an example, because they are right on the edge of young millennial and Gen Z. So they kind of blend from time to time, depending on the topic between the two. And I don't see them needing a lot that's different than maybe what I needed at that age. Um, when it comes to the human elements of life, I still believe that we have to show compassion. We need to show empathy. I mean, I needed those things too. I mean, as I told you in my story, I mean, I was doing that from the time I was 14, right? And people were giving me those things that I needed. I believe that there are human elements we've needed no matter our generation, and that hasn't changed. What I think the struggle is now with this generation is that I'm not so certain that we as companies are offering our leaders the right amount of time to deliver these things, nor are we giving them something that they probably need differently, which is learning. So I know that when I was at that age in my mid 20s, for example, I wasn't necessarily saying, I want you to teach me, or I need to continue to learn, or I need all this development like crazy, right? Because I didn't grow up in an era where I could learn anything by picking up my phone, right? And now I think in the workplace, one of the biggest things is not necessarily the human element that we need to give to that generation. It's the learning opportunities that we need to give to that generation. And I don't think that companies are set up very well to give this generation that much of their time as leaders to grow them. Similar to hiring, when we find that it's easier to hire somebody with many years of experience than to hire someone with less experience. Why? Because most of the time the leader doesn't have time in
Mm-hmm.
their mind to bring someone up to speed. It's a lot easier and a lot faster if they just bring somebody in that already knows it. So I think what we have to do as leaders and organizations, we need to step back and go, has our span of control gotten out of hand? Do we have too many people reporting to too few leaders in our organization? And that's preventing us from being able to spend enough time with our employees in that generation. Because if we're not spending the effective time with that generation, that's when they're going to leave, in my opinion. That's when they're going to look for something else if the company isn't giving them opportunity to grow, opportunity to learn. um, as I've said, my son who doesn't have the education, I mean, he left a company and went to a new company in the last couple of months. And then the reason he left was because he wasn't being developed. He wasn't growing. He didn't see an opportunity to continue in his career necessarily. And he had only been with them 2 years. I mean, they need this faster than maybe what we might have wanted that. And it doesn't mean he need what I see in that group, not even just mine, but the people that I mentor in our business. It's not that they want to leave the company. I'm finding that a lot of them will stay in those companies that they're with, but they want to make sure that their leader is giving them time to grow, is helping them grow, is giving them opportunities. It doesn't mean climbing the ladder. It doesn't mean giving them a leadership job tomorrow. It just means that their skills are continuing to be developed. And that's the biggest difference I see in those generations.
There's almost like an innate hunger that I think
Mm-hmm.
about with today's generation of people who have grown up in this digital transformation age. I was born in 1990, so I'm a millennial right in the middle. But I realized that the evolution of technology around me created opportunities for me to learn that like my parents couldn't even understand. And so when
Yes.
you're constantly surrounded with on tap information, at some point in time, you start thinking about all the different things that you can learn and the skills that you can develop. And if we think about fulfillment from a work perspective, what is less fulfilling than being stuck in a role where you literally are just a wheel in a cog or a cog in a wheel? Then you just continuously do work every day, but you're not developing as a person. That seems so
Yes.
in opposite and contrast to the societal norms that we see today. But the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking there was an interesting dichotomy: the instant gratification generation. We always think about it's everybody who's younger, Gen Z, Alpha, who has their phone on them, buzzing. They want instant gratification because of all the things that they experience. But is there a dichotomy to that, or the flip side of the coin, which says that our leaders today, because they're also experiencing all of this instant gratification societal norm, that they want the most out of their team right now, and they don't have the
Yes.
time to slow down and develop them? That's what I heard when you were
Yes.
saying there, and that's so interesting.
Yes. It's very, very real. It's very real. We definitely we are seeing a struggle in some leaders. I mean, there's obviously we've got millennial leaders, younger leaders in the organizations that see things very differently than maybe we still have boomer leaders. We have plenty of Gen Xers like myself in leadership, right? And it's not always generational that we can say that this is the case, but you do tend to see leaders more now wanting that instant gratification, that instant, I need you to be up to speed now. I don't have the patience to wait around a long time for you to get up to speed. And a lot of times, this the generations coming into the workplace can meet a lot of those expectations if we're very clear, because they are used to learning quickly. They are comfortable using technology. They're very comfortable with going out and asking Gen AI how to do something, right? And they'll just go with it, right? They're not afraid to do these things. So these the difference here is just getting we do what we call a reverse mentoring in our organization, where we have a maybe an early career person who's the mentor, and they're mentoring a late career person. And we are having the most amazing success with this program because we're actually putting that boomer or that Gen Xer in the position of, it's your job to learn, it's not your job to teach. And the questions that are getting asked of them to their younger millennials is incredible. I was just talking with a leader this morning who was telling me he's just had such an amazing experience with his early career female. So he is a man and a Gen Xer and in a leadership role, and he's got a female early career. So he's got both from a diversity and from a generational difference, he's got these learnings, and he's just fascinated by the different learnings that he's been able to get. And I think we have to keep doing more of these kinds of things, because what's not connecting, the dots that haven't connected yet, is the fact that these leaders can really ask for this to be the case, where I need you to be up to speed faster. You can ask that because the generations coming in are able to deliver on that if you give them clear expectations and you come in with this agreement, right? Is it going to be that they're ready to go tomorrow? Maybe not, but they could definitely be up to speed faster than you're giving them credit for, because you just assume that they're going to take as long as maybe it took you, right?
Right.
So it's
It's
fun.
what a superpower. When I have these conversations, I love the osmosis of transference of knowledge between generations. You know, we have 5 generations in the workforce right now, all the way from the silent
Yes.
generation all the way down to like Generation Alpha, which is insane to think about. But if you
Yes.
think about the superpower of an organization, it really is being tactful about opportunities like reverse mentoring, Because if you
Yes.
can go to somebody and be humble enough to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you teach me how to use this new tool? Can you teach me how to use ChatGPT? Can you teach me how to use
Yes.
the CRM, the systems, whatever it is? We've got generations that grew up in this environment of technology, and it's so digitally native to them that being able to kind of navigate through those things is such a superpower. And I love the fact that
Yes.
you guys are doing that. It's so cool. One of the
Yes.
conversations that I had previously on the podcast that was posed by another guest, and this is kind of one of our segments as well, is the difference between reskilling and hiring new talent. So often, when we talk about somebody's not in the right position or they're not a good fit for our organization, leadership today is so quick to say, fire that person, bring somebody else in. But we often understand that there's an enormous cost in trying to retrain somebody and bring somebody into the organization and get them caught back up. So why do you feel like it's so easy for us to say, get a new person, the grass is greener on the other side, instead of investing into this person and helping them reskill or skill up so they can actually grow within the organization?
My experience is that leaders don't necessarily want to fire them. My experience actually is that they don't know
Haven't you
how.
fired a ton of people in your career as well?
I don't fire.
Yeah, exactly.
I teach leaders and I coach leaders on how to manage their employees. Right. I love to tell people that when they don't know really what HR professionals do. I'm like, no, I don't hire and I don't fire unless it's in my own HR team.
Yep.
You're wrong. Um, but back in the day, that definitely was the case. There was a time where that was the case. So I think that leaders just don't know how. So as an HR professional, I take this quite personally. I find, and I've been talking a lot with my HR team as well, our responsibility really is to educate leaders on how do you have the right kinds of conversations with your employees to better understand how they can fit in the organization, because there is, unless there's a behavioral problem, there is a seat for them on the bus, right? If we look at, the Good to Great book, but there are seats for everyone if we're open minded and we're having good conversations and we truly know what it is our employees are good at, what they want to do, how they're motivated, where do their skills fit. And if they don't have the skills that you need for the future of work, which is something that I also believe is a major issue, then what are we doing to upskill? And again, that comes back to the HR organization, along with talent and development teams or learning and development teams, whatever your company might call them. Those teams need to be working together to figure out, what does that program look like? How do we do a better job of upskilling? We know, in organizations, at least in the US, we have numbers of organizations that will do education reimbursement programs. And oftentimes, what I see is that if an employee comes into the organization and they already have a degree, they never even consider that they can continue to get more education, and that you don't have to get another bachelor's degree or you don't have to get a master's degree. You can just take a course on Gen AI if you want, right? You can just take a course on how to be a better leader from a community college in a town you live in or from a university that you are associated with, right? But oftentimes we don't have this mindset that we can use these programs that companies have in place to just go and get one class, just to upskill us in one area that we need to. And leaders are not necessarily having the best conversations with the employees to encourage that. So I take ownership for that in a lot of ways, where I need to continue to drive those conversations with leaders, so the leaders are having the conversations with the employees on what is it that you want to learn more about, what is it that I need you to learn more about, and then again, delivering on the opportunities. Give them the time. If the course is during a work day, then it's okay. Like, figure out a way to allow them that flexibility to be able to go take a class, or partner them up with somebody who has the skills, right? So I can't honestly put the ownership on the employee or the leader, that they want to maybe necessarily find it easier to fire somebody than to reskill. I just think that we aren't doing our best to help them navigate the waters of reskilling and what that looks like. And we need to do that better. If you think back, we've had a lot of really good years where the hiring wasn't as hard as it is today. And when the hiring is easier, when the market is better for grabbing talented people, then you don't put as much focus on that. When you're in a situation now where the market is just so tough to hire good people in, I mean, there's not a lot of unemployed, and you've got a situation now with even the education system and maybe this generation not necessarily wanting to go that route. We have to think differently. And that comes back on the HR team, in my opinion. We need to help them.
There's an opportunity to help individuals grow, which I feel like we need to take advantage of, because the societal norms of people coming through the education system is not going to look like what it looked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago in the future. Yeah. When I think about,
Right.
You've mentioned kind of, the fact that students don't want to take on debt today. This is a huge issue for so many students when they think about like, okay, what am I going to do? Do I want to go and get my degree? And if I don't know what I want to do, I'm going to have to change my degree 4 times, 5 times in college. I'm going to come out with a substantial amount of debt. 54% of students who graduate from universities today are working jobs that take a high school degree. The inflation rate is going through the roof. It's very difficult. So what is the smart choice here? I mean, it seems like the smart choice is to go out, start getting lived experience, be a part of this YouTube generation who's going to learn as much as they possibly can for free, leverage that skill set to get into an organization that has the culture of saying, we will invest into you to help you continue to grow and learn, because we understand that the hungry employees, if you will, are going to be the people who we can help cultivate, nurture, and help grow to become the future of our organization. That seems like a landscape shift that is necessary to meet the people where they are today. Because a couple seconds ago, you had mentioned the future of work. What are some of the areas that we are not prepared for the future of work? I was really interested. A flag went up in my head when you said that, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into that and what that meant to you.
Yeah, so I will say in the space that I'm in, the future of work for us is really getting a little bit more into the world of automation. So I believe that we don't necessarily have the best education in place for young people to come out of high school or to come out of technical schools where there's a good understanding of the automation world. And with more and more technology, that will be an area that we have to spend some more time understanding, whether that is with the robotics kind of world or which is a big part of that. If I look at some of the industries that we serve, for example, the mining industry, what a lot of people don't necessarily understand about the mining industry is that, there are companies like ours who are working with customers to create safer spaces for mining. We will continue to need to take materials out of the ground. I mean, it's going to continue. We're going to want phones. We're going to everything you can imagine. We need copper. We need metals. We need all of these things. And so you're going to have to continue to have mining industry. And so we have to figure out how we do that in a more automated and more safe way. So moving to things like an initiative we run is eMine, where we're electrifying the mines with our customers. We're trying to, reduce emissions by getting rid of diesel-powered trucks and running electric trucks and things like that. But even going further than that, looking at the process underground. So I was in a mine in Sweden a couple of months ago where I had the opportunity to see this particular customer using incredible automation. So there was a control room with a group of employees that were running all of the machinery using their joysticks and their little foot controls, right, in this very safe room. So they're not having to be necessarily in the dangerous areas of the mine, and where you are drilling for your blasting material is all being done by robots. And, just trying to get to that space where this type of an industry that has been very traditional, you envision you've got the cart and the dirty guy with the little headlamp pushing the cart, right? Like these things have moved, they're shifting, and we're going to continue to see those shifts where we move to industries like that. Pulp and paper is another one. I mean, we're not going to get out of having, pulp and paper businesses. We're going to continue to have paper needs. We're going to continue to have that industry. And so automating processes and moving into more sustainable ways of operating is super powerful. So the future of work, the upskilling and the reskilling of employees is very, very important. For example, in this mine where I was at, I was talking with one of the operators, and he had been there for a very long time. So, he's telling me how the company actually, this particular customer of ours, had went through a process of reskilling their employees, right? He was an operator who was operating the skid steers, and he was down in the mines, and he was digging the ore with his, with his equipment. And now he sits in a room and he uses monitors and his hands and his feet. And, he said, but the company took that time and that initiative to reskill because they saw the needs of the future. And this is something that we also in our business are looking at, like, what do we do to make sure that our employees are prepared for the change as we are starting to move to a more automated world? So that's one. I would say another one is just, the digital eras, right? The AI side of things. I mean, there's still even using AI from a programming perspective, and in the computer science world and in the engineering worlds, being able to utilize the technology that's out there. Keeping up with that is going to be our bigger challenge, right? Everything is just happening so fast in that space that it's really difficult to keep up with that. But most people who have just the slightest interest in AI are already learning it themselves. So it's not necessarily that the companies need to stay on top of that. What we need to do is just empower more, probably, allow them the time and empower them to continue to learn. We do in our organization, we do hackathons and things like that. We have some competitions within the organization, and we're seeing this year, we saw quite a number of projects that came in through the hackathon that were AI related, of course, because it is such a hot topic. And it's just incredible to see what these amazing employees are able to come up with when we just give them the freedom to be open-minded and think creatively and look at things differently, right? So our job in the executive leadership teams of organizations is really to just open the minds of our employees and allow them and empower them to have that curiosity that's needed to take us into the future.
I mean, what an amazing time. I get really excited when I think about kind of how technology is having a huge impact on things like mining. I've seen some of the stuff on social platforms of these guys who are down in the pits in their big rigs, but they're actually in a remote location, and they're literally just navigating these huge systems with these monitors and like all the joysticks. I'm like, wow, it's is the future of what we're seeing. It is, it really is crazy.
Incredible. We are, we want to see robots in there. We'd love to get to a place where we're helping our customers run their mines with absolutely no one underground, right? I mean, that would just be amazing if we could get to a place where we didn't have to put human beings at risk, because it is still a very dangerous job, right? As much as we definitely put a lot of our customers in particular, put a lot of work into keeping those places safe and but you still have the human element there. And so let's see. I mean, there's so much work. There's other things. I mean, you think about the medical industry. I'm sure that, can you only imagine what 10 years might look like in the medical field and surgeries? And you're already seeing robotics being used in the medical field to some degree, but I can't even imagine what that might look like in the future. It'll be crazy.
It's going to be exciting. In
is.
2014, my first business was a telehealth company. And what we did is we said there was going to be a future where people were going to want to see their doctor virtually. And a lot of our early lack of success was the inability for us to kind of break some of the belief systems of some of these leaders and CMOs and CEOs of healthcare systems. And then all of a sudden during 2020, on a Wednesday when the world shut down, we got a lot of emails when people started coming back to us, which was really cool. But sometimes, it takes a catalyst to get us there. And I'm so glad that we have leaders and organizations like ABB that are kind of pushing us in the right direction, because the future is going to be a beautiful place, but it does involve technology. So as we land the plane here, April, I want to kind of give you an opportunity to ask a question of our next HR hero. What would you like to ask them?
I thought about this, but I was actually thinking about the question around AI, but I think you've already talked a lot about AI. So maybe I'll try to find a new question so that you're not bringing that topic up again. I like the question of upskilling. So I think honestly, I think my question of your next HR hero would be to help me learn from them when I listen to their recording. I'd like to also know, I guess, a little bit more about how that that hero is changing the landscape of the future of work through reskilling and upskilling. I think that's a great question that I would also like to continue to ask of my colleagues in the space because I
I
don't have
love
it
it.
figured out completely. That's for sure.
And I feel like it's a necessity that we're going to have to be able to address as we talk about the future of work, how it's positioned differently, how we upskill our team members. Because, like you said, in an environment where we have low levels of unemployment, we have to be able to get the most out of our team, and that means investing into them, giving them the space, the time, so they can flourish and use that creativity, like we've talked about in so many examples today. So,
Yes.
April, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the HR Heroes podcast. You are truly the definition of somebody who had some early experiences in life, and you've done so many amazing things to create safe spaces for other people in this work-life integration process that we're doing. And I just want to say, for everybody watching and listening, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Keenan, for having me. It's been a joy talking with you, and I look forward to staying connected.
There we go. All right, guys. That's another episode of the HR Heroes podcast. That's a wrap. Catch you in the next one.